Yeah, let's dive right in. So exciting day on Friday. There was a bank run. like, here's the image of it. Folks lining up outside of Silicon Valley Bank to try to pull out cash. Uh, a- and it's unclear exactly what started this, except like the group chats of venture capitalists. So
Hmm.
Peter Thiel started telling all his gremlins to take out all the cash they can from this bank, and a whole bunch of other people started doing it too. And then they started going online and saying, where is Joe Biden, where is Janet Yellen, we need them to step in and save us, or this entire ship is going down. And for me, it was an opportunity that I don't remember having in like 2007, 2008 to get online and be like, fuck you, you motherfucker. Like, the, and so there was a decent amount of like Schadenfreude that was people were able to partake in, but nonetheless, they've got what they wanted. Basically, the depositors over the $250,000 FDIC limit, backed up by good old Uncle Sam. And yeah, that's where we stand today. Is trying to make sense of what exactly happened.
And let's also not forget that the action of the government here, I mean, like forever changes, right? It adds a new wrinkle in any kind of future policy, right? So like this isn't just an isolated event in the sense of this is the chapter of SVB, the second largest bank failure in American history, right? Pretty wild. Um, but it's also going
It's
to
the
have long.
16th largest bank in the United States. And yeah, just some other context is they were one of the. I mean, I assume like all the other banks. I don't want to tar a bank unfairly, but I assume like many banks, they were advocating for the relaxation of the Dodd Frank
Oh yeah.
sort of limits that Trump signed. Yeah.
So I mean, like this is a story I think that touches on, I mean, in a lot of ways, Matt, like almost everything we've been covering on both this program, but also on the Michael Brooks show over the years, right? The speculative nature of tech, the tech industry, right? The lack of rootedness in like actual material conditions in the sense of the valuation of these companies, the stupidity of the leaders of these organizations, the lack of like really shocking lack of knowledge. Like I'll tell you,
Mm.
nothing ever makes me feel sometimes, like I'm not applying myself to my fullest when you realize how some of these super, super rich guys like don't understand, for example, like deposit insurance and things like that.
Well, yeah, can we talk about that a little bit, because like there's something fishy going on here, because like I said, like government insures up to of a million, right?
Hmm.
Um, and usually, and I'm not a depositor of over $250,000, so this is all
Despite
theoretical
what
to me.
your net worth online says, you
Exactly.
see that Matt's a
Um,
multimillionaire according to Google.
but my understanding is there are very like obvious ways to hedge against that risk beyond that, which is to uh, you know distribute it across other banks. You wouldn't do that if you wanted, say, if you're Silicon Valley Bank, you want as much cash as possible to play
Yeah.
with, right? And so like that's the real thing that's going on here. Silicon Valley Bank had all these things. We're holding this in a way that wasn't actually supposed to be backed up by the government, but they knew it would. But they did that because that's more cash on hand for them to go out and give, like, say, very low interest. Even JD Vance, who banked at Silicon Valley Bank, has admitted this is part of why people will go there to deposit, which is you get these sweetheart low interest deals if you get as
Mhm.
much of your cash there as possible, because they actually know like the real risk isn't, as we found out, so much of a risk, because you can get Jason Calacanis and David Sachs to come up and bully the government into making them whole.
No, I mean exactly, and like we'll find out more, I'm sure, over the next coming weeks about just how shady a lot of those behind the scenes deals were. But Silicon Valley Bank, now it looks bad for them to admit this, but this was a bank that held a significant chunk of Silicon Valley venture capital. A lot of startups, were banking there, right? And it was like one of these things that, like, if you're a startup and you get an influx of capital, there were sort of nudges and winks to say like, yeah, y'all should be banking with this particular bank, right?
Mhm.
which meant that a lot of one industry was concentrated in a bank. That's not accidental. And like, just going back really quick about the FDIC and their, and the insurance on depositors, $250,000 or less, right? They're already like, the thing that's so funny about these guys is like, I can't remember David Sachs's like entourage of other boys who are VC people and podcasters on the side, dark as hell. Sorry, that's just like,
They go under the nomiker of the all in crowd.
yeah.
So
They were saying,
all in
what's
on one bank, a little bit.
yeah. Well, they were, one of them, Jason, I think his name, was like online, having like a meltdown for the past few days. But one of the things he was saying is like, it's time for Silicon Valley to like, innovate again. And like, we need to create products that like divvy up deposits so that, you're insured. That already exists. It's existed for a while, actually. And it's actually just insane to me to comment on these, that people comment on these kind of things. And actually, like, I comment on these things because I want to have, like, I understand these things because I want to be able to comment on them. I want to have an understanding on them. I don't have like vested financial interest in this stuff. It's
Right.
actually insane to me to be as invested as these people are in some of these things, and to be just ignorant of these systems. But I mean, we have like a lot of like big picture stuff we want to get to, like, just in case you're tuning in, you don't know what happened, like give you the quick skinny of it. Um, the second largest bank failure in recent history. Banking regulators shut down Silicon Valley Bank on Friday, March 10th. And it really shows like the kind of weird casino system we're in, that the wrong people are in control of guiding our financial system and also like our technology. Not good. Um,
Yes.
the government.
Innovation, as they say, like as Bill Ackman said, if innovation goes down drains, like we've been trusting innovation to you dumb motherfuckers. The people who have flooded the zone with like decentralized because of Bitcoin, we're all banking at the same fucking bank.
Mhm. No, yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, it's not decentralizing; it's re-centralizing, right? It's just like
Right.
moving where things are. So, anyways, y'all know this now. The government's now going to protect the depositors at this bank. Many of them are very large players in Silicon Valley, and again, like, the whole saga is really revelatory of the way that major players in our financial system and our tech industry are just like really ignorant of the financial system. I mean, just basic business concepts. But yeah, let's just get everyone on the same page right quick. Um, SVB, and then later Signature Bank, which is a bank that had bet big on crypto, which, just side note, it's very funny. I think some people in the crypto world were like trying to join in on the fun, right? And then very quickly were, wrapped
Well,
up in the same issue as everyone
Tim
else.
Pool, Tim Pool triumphantly saying, banks are failing as Bitcoin is rising. Like Bitcoin, my understanding is Bitcoin's price went up as soon as it was basically in hand that Silicon Valley Bank was going to be bailed out. So
Mhm.
yeah, all that shit got juiced again because they realized like, oh, there's going to be a certain amount of support for this bullshit going forward.
Um, so, effectively what happens is you have a lot of concentration of Silicon Valley capital in this bank. But it still hasn't hit the threshold of the $250 billion threshold, which requires very, very strict government oversight and stress tests. Why? I think most people understand how banks work, but just to be really, quick and clear about this, you put money in the bank, they don't just like put it in like a Daffy Duck style vault and it sits there. No, they loan it out. They buy assets with it. They use that money to increase the profits for the bank. They use that money, so it's not just sitting there. It's being utilized in a way to maybe help somebody buy a house, start a small business, etc. Right? That's just like the basic fundamentals of banking in a capitalist economy. And like, also just like, if we're in this system, right? You wouldn't want people to just be able to sit on their money, right? It's like, it's good to, for example, to have things like loans be out there, so that people can pay for things. The way it's done is nasty, right?
Mhm.
That's why we support things like public banking. So instead of it being something that's utilized for the profit of the bankers and these folks, which is bad and encourages this kind of risky, dangerous behavior with your deposits. But the fact that the money's being loaned out is like, I don't know. Sometimes I see people like on our side who are like, worry of banks, worry the financial system, sort of miss the mark here. The problem is that it's being utilized for a very particular system and a very particular set of interests, not the fact that it's the problem is not the fact that it's not just sitting there in a vault being guarded
Mhm.
by somebody, but rather that that money is being loaned out with a very particular interest and goal in mind, and that's not oftentimes the public interest or the depositor's interest. Um,
And can we just on that note, like, because I kind of said like this morning, like this is the we want central planning here
Totally.
because of like, and it's not just like because these people seeking profit in like whatever, like it needs to be directed like I guess could you imagine like for folks like if we had instead Obama was Bernie Sanders and said we're going to move to like a public banking system, we could basically have had this whole moment of lower interest rates directed towards useful things.
No, totally. And like what Matt's talking about here is the fact that this is something that's buoyed the tech industry, right? An industry that has a profitability problem. Not the fact that people don't make a lot of money in it, but the fact that like the companies themselves oftentimes do not produce and enjoy significant amounts of profit. So they've been buoyed by the fact that interest rates are really, really low. And when interest rates are really, really low, what does that mean for somebody who has a lot of capital? Well, they need to be investing, they need to be spreading that money around, because just having it parked in a bank is actually not that profitable for them, right? So because there's this like big wash of capital that sort of needs to find a higher rate of return than you're going to get from traditional banking, there has been a lot of money out there for anyone who, I mean, like we all know these stories, like, when the blockchain thing was blowing up, there was a tea company called the Long Island Tea Company that changed its name to Long Island Bitcoin, and their stock price like exploded overnight, right? Like the thing is, like, there's no due diligence here. It's just like literally people were like, where can I park my money? What can I put my money in that's going to give me like a higher rate of return than just putting in a traditional treasury bond, or putting in a bank. Right, so it meant that there was a lot of people willing to invest in this previous decade because of Federal Reserve policy. And as Matt's saying, it's like, yeah, what if we were using that cheap interest rate to like build roads, build housing, do all these kind of things, right? Well, instead of that, we got Bored Ape, six different
Yeah.
iterations of Uber for whatever the fuck.
Hey, look, like
Not banking.
Roku was one of the companies that had like a whole bunch of money, and look, I have a
They
Roku,
got
like
something insane,
yeah,
like
like
five
but
hundred
like
million dollars just sitting in a
yeah,
bank, which is just like crazy to me again.
yeah, just insane.
um, so anyways, we're taking a little while, but this stuff really hits on like these larger issues. Effectively what happens is the Silicon Valley Bank is dealing with something that the tech industry is dealing with, which is that the profits are down, and that means deposits are down, right? So when the deposits are down, the amount of money that's coming into the bank on a daily, weekly, monthly level is lower. So the bank needs to find a way to make enough capital so that it can meet its requirements, so that if you do, if one of these companies does say, hey, we need, a million of our dollars here, they're able to produce that money for them. So the bank has to, sell off assets, try to raise money, try to encourage more investment or get more deposits, or do what they were doing, which was investing in treasury bonds. Problem with treasury bonds is as the Fed continues to lower the interest rate, it means that a lot of those investments aren't doing very well for them. And effectively, what's happened over this past month is that their financial position was getting more and more shaky, not so much in the entirety of the portfolio of Silicon Valley Bank, but in their liquidity, right? And that's
Mhm.
a terminology using for like cash that is like easily accessible that you can utilize. So as they're getting into trouble because again, Silicon Valley companies aren't making very much money, so the deposits that are coming into the bank are getting lower, and because of raising interest rates, making the spread on those treasury bonds that Silicon Valley Bank was trying to utilize less profitable for them. They got into a position where their financials looked a little bit shaky. And the irony here is that it was the same bloodsuckers, right, whose capital they've been, benefiting from, people like Peter Thiel, who ended up killing them. Because
Yeah.
Peter Thiel started pulling all their money out of it, encouraging people in his orbit to take money out of it. A big influential newsletter that goes out to a lot of VC firms was saying, "Get your money out of Silicon Valley Bank right now." So everybody shows up. This is what happens when a bank fails, right? Everybody shows up and asks for their money, and because banks never have everyone's money, you have a bank run. Um, right. So this was like a self-created issue. Not so much that like there wasn't, you know, dangerous behavior from Silicon Valley Bank, but again, this was something that like the investor class in the Silicon Valley Bank system and the people around it all basically like got together, conspired, and like sunk the ship. Um, so you know, this is the crisis there, right? This is what creates this massive bank run. And you know, before we zoom out a little bit, like let's also remember that you know this story that we're getting about, well, all these small businesses wouldn't be able to meet payroll if the FDIC didn't increase its insurance and the amount of money that that they'll basically cover, because now everything, all deposits are going to be covered. You know, there's this argument: local small businesses are going to fail. You know, janitors aren't going to get their paychecks, etc. Right? And like, I have no doubt about it. For example, that these companies, nasty as they are, this parasitic class, nasty as they are, would be very willing to try to make excuses to hold off or delay payments to their workers. But let's also remember that like the what the scope of this crisis is. What typically happens when a bank fails like this is the federal government comes in, they take control of the bank, and they have a fire sale on the assets of the bank to raise the capital, so that they can pay off the bank's obligations to the people who've deposited money in the bank, right? So it's not as if there is no like. Basically, the story is that like it's either FDIC increases and covers the entirety of these deposits, or um, you know, basically all these people just go without being paid, right? Is not very accurate, right? And is playing on these kind of fears that they're trying to stoke up, because at the end of the day, what this was shoring up the wealth and the interest of a very, very powerful class, right? And they're trying to obscure that by telling these kind of stories, right? I'm not saying that, you know, necessarily having any kind of government involvement in something like this is bad, but the way that this was done, I think, is a bad scenario. And two,
Yeah.
like the lies that were being spread over the weekend by a lot of these, you know, hype men, basically, for the industry, were just that, lies.
Yeah, like I don't have the like libertarian position where it's like the government just let shit crash come what may. But to the extent you intervene, it and we're very far from this, and we only get little hints of it in say like the final paragraph of a Bernie Sanders statement. But this needs to be a hostage crisis, and it's a shame that we're not even close to that because like that's what like okay fine, why are you raking in profits in the good times then? Like if this is all like imaginary and we're gonna actually play you know good old Uncle Sam's there as the catcher, you know, fielding everything, then what point, like your shit should be taxed massively or the government should just be doing this business itself.
Yeah. No, I mean, like 100%. And like, again, you know, because basically what happens in that situation is like you have a 1 to 2 week period while the government, usually these things go very quickly, while the government is sort of raising that capital to make sure that everybody's whole, or the vast majority of people are made whole. There's a whole like checklist and a pecking order for who gets taken care of first, right? But that was
Mhm.
never talked about. And like, maybe, I mean, maybe they just don't know about it, right? Because like it seems like a lot of them are completely ignorant about this system in the first place.
Yeah.
um but like, let's get to SVB for a second. One, like, Matt, you talked about the white glove service, right? And to be clear, what they mean by that is that companies were sort of enticed to bank with Silicon Valley Bank. One, because like VCs, the venture capitalists, were literally telling them to, right? Saying like, this
Mhm.
is the one you got to bank with. If you want to do business with us, we prefer you bank here, right? So who knows what's going on there? Very strange, right?
I'd be concerned about a pump and dump if I was victimized by that, and I would want
Well,
Peter
I mean,
Thiel
there
in
was a
front of.
pump and dump in this. Oh, I mean, a dump at least. Like, you know, the president of SVB sold off a significant amount of shares, you know, 2 weeks before this crisis, right? So there was warning signs internally, and some people made some good money off of this too. Like, let's not forget that.
Mhm.
What the white glove service means is that like, if you're some guy who dropped out of college at 20 and you created a startup company and you have all this attention and affection right now from the VC class, you're living in San Francisco, you're feeling like life's about to get really nice. Um, you want to buy a house, right? Because you don't want to rent anymore. Well, Silicon Valley Bank's going to give you a really nice deal on your mortgage, right? They're going to give you a really nice deal on all these other kind of financial products, right? Separate from your business, right? That's what they're going to give to you, right? So there's
Mhm.
all these weird incentives that are at play. But I want to get to the regulatory stuff, if that's all right, Matt. Because the thing about Silicon Valley Bank that is so nasty, the reason the story is so frustrating to watch, is that Silicon Valley Bank was a major player in allowing something like this to happen, not just because of their own internal mismanagement, but because of the lobbying that they did to the government. Lord in heaven, don't sit here and think that I'm saying, oh, these poor politicians were bamboozled. These politicians were getting paid off, right?
Yeah.
But Silicon Valley Bank was a major player in repealing the regulations that would have prevented something like this happening. And actually, sorry, I know there's a lot of information coming at y'all, but like just one really quick thing about these regulations. What were they? Remember, I talked to a second ago about how banks they utilize the deposits for different things like loans, etc., right? Because of what happened in 2007 2008, there was this thing called the Dodd-Frank bill. People probably have heard it before, and it was a very robust system. I mean, not robust enough, but comparatively, to basically make sure that banks were being responsible with their investments. Because remember, what happened in the 2007 2008 financial crisis is it was a localized crisis in mortgages, right? Banks were giving out bad mortgages, and once those started to be recognized as bad, because so many of the bank's collateral was tied to these bad mortgages, right? Because they had bundled them all up together. Once those started to evaporate, banks went insolvent overnight, right? So there was a system that was created to have stronger oversight from the federal government, higher requirements for the amount of capital that you just have to have on hand, right? Liquid assets that banks have to have on hand. And regular stress tests from the Federal Reserve, where the Federal Reserve is basically coming in, looking at what's going on at your bank, to make sure that you aren't sort of at risk of insolvency, right? And if you watched our Rosa Luxemburg, series too, it's very interesting. Rosa Luxemburg talks a lot about this in the context of even the 20th century. That's the thing about finance capital, is that while it can sort of invest in the business cycle and might be able to, make sort of investments that might prevent like a localized crisis, because it actually connects everything so much. It means that a particular crisis, like again 2007 2008, like there was in mortgages, becomes a global financial crisis, right? Even if you have no money or investment in that system, right? So there were these kind of regulations that are put in place after the financial crisis to prevent this kind of thing from happening. But SVB was a major player in trying to get these things renegotiated for banks that had less than $250 billion in assets. And let me pull this up really fast for y'all.
250
Um,
billion?
sorry?
250 billion?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Those are big
Um,
numbers.
SVB chief, this is from the good folks at the Lever. SVB chief pressed lawmakers to weaken bank risk regulations. The collapse of banks president told Congress enhanced prudential standards should be lifted given the low risk profile of our activities. Quote, without such changes, SVB likely will need to divert significant resources from providing financing to job creating companies in the innovation economy to complying with enhanced prudential standards and other requirements, wrote Becker,
Oh
who
my
reportedly
god.
sold $3.6 million of his own stock 2 weeks ago in the lead up to the bank's collapse. Quote, given the low risk profile of our activities and business model, such a result would stifle our ability to provide credit to our clients without any meaningful corresponding reduction in risk.
Ooh, okay.
I mean, look, I mean, it's amazing,
We're out here
right?
just trying to do just we're basically it's also like comparing themselves to farmers like, oh, we're just like farmers, but we're farming job creation.
Yeah.
And we're just out here that we're just out of the goodness of our hearts trying to just produce a job for this guy and a job for Main Street, and you just hate us for reasons we can't understand.
And in fact, I mean, look, I mean, you could have seen how insane that was in 2015, but when he made that statement, but like it is actually the fact that they are so heavily attached to the quote unquote innovation economy that they got into this crisis in the first place, right?
Yeah.
Because so many of the things that they attach themselves to were just like dreams and hopes, right? Is the future, right? We're investing in the future and innovation, right? And people know the tech criticism at this point, right? It's like the big innovations in the tech industry have been trying to find ways to get around labor law and trying
Yeah.
to way to find ways to get around banking and financial regulations. Right, those have been the big innovations that we've seen. Not so much this great, beautiful innovation that's I'm sure coming down the pipe, especially after this crisis. So, like they were major players in eradicating and ending these regulations on these smaller sized banks, right? Smaller compared to like J.P. Morgan, etc. Um, the Lever also reported that just months ago, Silicon Valley Bank lobbyists were lobbying against increasing payments into the deposit insurance fund, the very fund now that they are ransacking.
Right.
Right, because it's going to hurt them. In quote from their lobbyists, the proposed increase would unduly burden banks and may harm the broader economy. Yeah, not
Oh
as
man.
much as a goddamn bank run France.
I love like dressing up your own shit into I'm actually concerned about the broader economy.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, let's like because I want to talk more broadly about like analysis of like the tech industry and some of the fundamental issues here. But like, let's just be really clear about this. This was something that happened during the Trump administration, no doubt about it. But 17 Democrats got together, locked arms with the Republicans to make sure this happened. Barney Frank himself, the Frank in the Frank Dodd, sorry, Dodd Frank, was a major player, publicly coming out and saying like, yeah, we probably can get rid of these regulations on these quote unquote small banks, right? They're
yeah.
so small that they don't need regulation. But also last weekend we were told they were so big that if they fail, the entire U.S. economy will be crippled.
Yeah, one note on that because there was this other thing that in that lobbying about that Silicon Valley Bank did. Of course, you had like Chris Coons, Mark Warner, like the corporate Democrats. Chris Coons often if is like basically the corporate angel on Joe Biden's shoulder. But also
Hmm.
you had Midwestern Democrats like Tester and Heitkamp from North Dakota saying, we need to really make sure these one size fits all regulations don't disadvantage regional banks.
Hmm.
And guess what, Heidi Heitkamp? You got a fucking regional bank there called the Bank of North Dakota. That's the only one you're going to need. I don't give a fuck about any of these other ones. Regulate the shit out of them. And like that's like these sorts of like, oh, we're just a small little regional bank.
Just a tiny little. We're
Ridiculous.
just small, right?
Yeah, and I remember we covered that at the time. Like I'm pretty sure we did that on TMBS.
So it's nasty stuff. It just shows, I think, very clearly, and we'll get into some of the hilarious like cultural divides, how the politicians are trying to sell this to us in just a second. Well, look, this is lock arms moment, right? Just like it was with the railroad strike. Same thing when it comes to banking regulations, right? These companies lobby the same people from across the political spectrum. So don't let anybody for a second tell you that like, oh, well, thank God the Democrats are back in power now, right? Because they're overseeing this and they also participate in this. And again, Barney Frank, the person who Dodd Frank holds his name, was somebody saying like, no, this isn't an issue, right? And just goes on to have a very nice post career in that.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing is like to the in the immediate aftermath, you have frankly people on both sides doing like I mean Josh Hawley. If I squint, it looks like something I agree with, where it's like where he's making the correct point, which is that who cares whether this is a taxpayer funded bailout or not? The government's stepping in and it's going to rebound, right? And then he goes on about some that we're not going to pay for a woke bailout or whatever like that. But the position is like, yes, we should be continuing regulation and that sort of thing, which like even Ro Khanna after working all weekend for the bailout has come around to. But the broader question that the Democrats don't really want to talk about is this is Obama era like recover policy coming back to bite us all in the ass. And we need to have a broader, much deeper conversation about how economic priorities get financed in this country because this is it.
This entire industry is effectively a government project at this point, in the sense that the people who have benefited the most from financial from the reaction to the financial crisis has been people in finance, but in particular people in the quote unquote tech industry, right?
Mhm.
And like, I almost don't want to call it the tech industry because again, like this is speculative industry, right? It's
Yeah.
not like for the most part like the actual things that are utilized and might make people's lives better. It's speculation on a high rate of return by basically being able to cannibalize already existing activity, being able to subvert labor law. I mean, like what are the most famous parts of the gig economy? I mean, of the tech economy. I gave away the tech, the tech industry. It's the gig economy, right? What is the gig economy? It was finding already existing economic activity, taxis, food delivery service, things like that. Subverting in a lot of cases, like in the food industry, the profits of the actual restaurants, the people who are cooking the food, the people who are delivering the food, trying to find a way that they can sit on top and take as much profit as possible from both the restaurants and the workers and subvert basic labor law all in the process, right? Externalize the cost of doing business on someone else, right? And now, we're seeing socializing some of the costs of business practices and all these kind of things, right? Like this industry has not been something that has been providing tremendous amounts of human value, and yet because of this like backseat approach that the Democrats and the Republicans like to take to government policy, right? The free market, this rational system, is going to provide the best outcome, right? That's what they all believe. You're seeing it play out right in front of you right now. And I want to share this real quick because we couldn't talk about this without citing um, Ed Angueso, excuse me, who's been just killing it and pissing all these people off, by the way, which has been pretty awesome to see, Matt. But they have a really, and you should read this entire piece. It's in Slate, the incredible tantrum venture capitalists threw over Silicon Valley Bank. People should read the entire piece, but I want to highlight this paragraph. I think this might set us up, Matt, really well. To put it plainly, for the past 10 years, venture capitalists have had near perfect laboratory conditions to create a lot of money and make the world a much better place. And yet, some of their proudest accomplishments that have attracted some of the most eye watering sums have been one, chasing the dream of zeroing out labor costs while monopolizing a sector to charge the highest possible price AI in the gig economy. Two, creating infrastructure for speculating on digital assets that will be used to commodify more and more of our daily lives, cryptocurrency in the metaverse. And three, militarizing public space or helping police and military operations. That's been what they've done with this money, right? And like it's like a similar criticism we make of IRA, right? The Inflation Reduction Act, right? Instead of actually like utilizing government funds to build out like real public power systems, right? To take control of these systems, to upgrade in weatherized homes, all that kind of stuff. We're just giving people tax credits and giving businesses tax credits and hoping that they're going to do the right thing for this,
Yeah.
right? And it was the same thing when it came to sort of getting us out of the slump of the financial crisis under Obama, right? It was, a gift to very, very powerful people who have one goal and one goal only, which is trying to maximize as much profit as possible. It's not innovating, it's not creating. Um, and we're dealing with this socialized cost of this, right? We already gave them our money, right? When these people were basically buoyed by Federal Reserve and government policy over the past decade, and now we're giving it to them again, right? It's just it's really wild to
Yeah.
to continue watching this play out. And in the piece too, and other people have noted that one thing that's really notable about this piece is about this like crisis is that all of the money that is sort of allocated, right? Capital allocation, which we'll talk about in just a minute, right? Has been wasted. It's created nonsense products, right? That again, like the highest innovation has been trying to subvert the law, right? Be it financial regulations or labor law. And the people who are making these investments have no idea what they're being investing in the first place, which is why somebody like Musk has a particular interest in a platform like Twitter, because they understand these things are all hype machines, because it is you're just trying to get enough eyes on something, and the people with money are just like they are giving it away to folks who have no idea what they're doing with it, concentrating capital in really unproductive, dangerous, and harmful ways. And now because the investment scene is changing because the interest rates are rising, right? That has sort of buoyed this entire system. You're seeing crisis after crisis, right? Because it's not just Silicon Valley Bank, right? We've seen massive layoffs in the tech sector over the past few months, right? Because these organizations have been very, very bad at innovating, and it's not because of the people, the actual tech workers, the people who want to create and do things. It's because the management is chasing after the new shiny thing. And you see that from, companies, the example I gave earlier about like the Long Island iced tea company that, changed their name to blockchain and got a shitload of money. Two things like to run on Silicon Valley Bank, right? Where because Peter Thiel's telling people to do things, everyone does it, right? That happens all across the board in Silicon Valley, right? Theranos, remember that? The bullshit blood testing company, something that anyone with any background in medical science would tell you, that doesn't really sound possible, but Lord, if they can do that, they've really changed the game, right? Well, it turns out to be able to do that, they had to cordon off people from speaking with each other, be, incredibly secretive, right? But all of these people, all this capital flowed into that company and that organization because it is just following a trend, which is why you have popular like podcasts like David Sachs and all these other folks. They spend so much of their time on like influencing people because it's all a big scam.
Yes. I mean, that's what venture capitalists are. And they got like we talked about with the cheap money era, they got a whole bunch of air in their sails to go act like there's philosopher kings, and they know the future of innovation and blah 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 blah. And what was the result? Like gassing people up about NFTs
Yeah.
and now the AI thing, or also the metaverse. Like this is all just like these are all sort of puffs of that same gaseous air.
Yeah. Do we have I can't see it, but do we have this clip ready, or did
We
you
got
want something else
Elon,
first?
yeah,
Let's
yeah.
let's
So
bring up
this,
Elon really quick because like this I think is the irony is just so clear here. Somebody like Musk, who has been an incredible beneficiary of government projects, of government money, saying what he's saying here. But let's hear an expert on capital allocation talking about capital allocation for a second.
Assume, then at a certain point, really what you're doing is capital allocation. So you're not. It's not money.
he's talking about taxation here.
You're not. It's not money for personal expenditures. What you're doing is capital allocation, and it does not make sense to take the job of capital allocation away from people who have demonstrated great skill in capital allocation and give it to an entity that has demonstrated very poor skill in capital allocation, which is the government. You can.
And
Holy
then
crap!
I think what he says after that is like the classic libertarian line about it being a gang or a mob or
Yeah,
something like that. Um, yeah, I mean, look, it just Musk is a patron saint of certain people who were doing this crime that the government needs to get involved and allocate capital to these folks. Um,
Elon
well,
Musk. Elon Musk got $1/3 billion from Barack Obama during the financial crisis. Like the idea that and like I can't make a fucking windshield wiper and steering wheel on
can't
his
believe that.
cars. Like the idea, like, and all these, and this is to a man, all of these guys. Elon is just the king VC
Mhm.
charlatan, but like Calacanis, Sachs, all these guys who were like joking about rug pulls and NFTs, they are all like this. They all think they are the Lord. Like we couldn't possibly do this remotely more democratically or public in a public fashion.
Or rationally. That's just like
Right.
before we even get
I
into nice ideas like democracy, just rational,
Yeah. Like
reasonable,
these are the
intelligent,
guys.
good capital allocation, right? We've given the capital has been allocated to these motherfuckers, and they have created crisis after failure after failure, and now we're running into crisis after crisis. Um, it is just clear as day that these people should not be in control of the amount of resources that they're in control of, nor should they be allowed to be sort of in charge of technological innovation. It's a
Yeah.
waste. It's a real human waste to allow these people to have the influence and power that they do over our society. You
Right.
look at Musk, somebody who has just continued to literally just like burn money into the ground with this fucking boring company, which fails time and time again. And I'll have more, people who have been curious about his plans in Bastrop County. By the way, I don't know if you've seen this map, but he's just trying to dump tons of contaminated water into the Colorado River here.
Well, that doesn't sound like
For what social purpose, right? Like not saying that that's something that's like a good price to pay in the first place, but like, at least if you're like, okay, well, this is like, opening up some doors and mobility for people or doing something, productive, right? Again, I would still think it was bad, but it's like, can deal with that. To literally just like, it's a game, right? It's just like he's just like digging holes in this property in Bastrop right now for no reason. That's capital allocation that's coming from these brain geniuses. And yeah, again, like they know because they've been sucking off the teat of the government from the get-go. They know Biden gave them a perfect green light that they can continue doing what they're doing here. There's not going to be accountability, right? There might be some folks who fall in like leadership of SVB, right? Maybe.
Oh yeah. Individual level, yeah.
But as an industry, for what it's done to our society, right? Setting themselves right up again to do it, to rinse and repeat.
Yeah, no, I mean, we have everyone, like it was played up front. The Republicans are talking about how this is woke banks, and Wall Street Journal talking about how it's woke, and then you have the Democrats big saying we really need to regulate. It's like, well, we'll see, we'll see if you do that. Now that the crisis is over, let's see how you get back to that. I don't know. Maybe there will be like Josh Hawley, and there'll be some other Republicans, and we'll see.
I mean, like last time we talked about the tech industry, we've talked about the structural crisis of SVB. The last thing I think to talk about is the politics here, and it's just there's just no better example of just like the talk a lot, do nothing system that we have right now. Don Jr., not the only one, but was out here saying, well, the reason SVB failed was because it went woke, right? Which again, like, what the fuck are you talking about? I mean, the best I can get from that is that they have like women in some leadership positions there. Kudlow as well, who show up with.
Well, the Wall Street Journal had a tweet or a piece by some op-ed writer, and basically said like, look, I'm not saying it's everything, but they did spend time. Oh, here it is. Was there? I'll just share it with everybody here. There we go. Was there a regulatory failure? Perhaps. SVB was regulated like a bank, but looked more like a money market fund. Then there's this. In its proxy statement, SVB notes that besides 91% of their board being independent, I don't even know what that means. Like they don't have other. I don't know what that means. I'm not.
I mean, I think it means that like they're independent from the company, so there's oversight.
Sure. And it's, I guess that's meaningful. SVB notes that besides 91% of their board being independent and 45% women, they also have one Black, one LGBTQ plus, and 2 veterans. And he goes on to write, I'm not saying 12 white men would have avoided this mess, but the company may have been distracted by diversity demands.
Oh my God. Look, and like this is like the fundamental point here. It's just like the problem was SVB was trying to make as much money as possible, which is the religion that you share with them, whoever the Wall Street Journal op-ed writer is there, right? Y'all practice and believe in the same religion. It's just profit above all other things. That's what got them into this crisis. Not like people like recognizing like the horrors of slavery or that we shouldn't discriminate against LGBTQ folks, right? Like we can laugh and recognize how stupid it is, but you also see it on the Democrat side where it's Trump, right? Trump is one that like just like also gets people's blood boiling in a way that's like unique, right? Trump oversaw this. We wash our hands of the problem, despite the fact, as we noted, like the Democrats played a significant role in pulling back these regulations as well. like in a lot of ways, critical role in making sure it happens or if it fails, right?
Yeah.
They're playing the same game. They get the same donations, right? The Republicans are playing the same games as the Democrats. The stories they tell are different, right? Don Jr. can go out there and say it's DEI or whatever the fuck they're talking about this week. Democrats are going to say, remember Trump? Remember Trump? Remember Trump? He was so bad, right? While all overseeing the same system that enables these parasites to just draw and suck value out of all of us and waste tremendous amounts of resources, right? An industry that's lobbied extremely hard against basic social programs in this country, has people who were wagging their finger about, oh, if you forgive student loans, people aren't going to have any responsibility, and a couple months later, we're saying we need the government to come in to absolve us of our responsibility in the decisions that we made, in the things that we asked for and got and bit us in the ass, right?
Yeah.
It's just like, like it's no real, because our audience is very smart, intelligent folks. It shouldn't come as a surprise to you, these kind of things, right? That, it's all this big political theater to keep us from really talking about what's going on, right? Is it outlandish claims from the right, or it's just like this hyperfixation on Donald Trump as a sole unique figure instead of somebody who is very attached, to all of these systems. It's just the perfect example of the nonsense and the garbage that is fed to the American public to distract them from the fact that there is a very, very clear class divide in this country, that there are people who get taken care of when things get bad, and there are people who get fucked when things are bad. And I'm going to tell you that if you're listening to this program, you're more than likely in the latter category there.
Yeah, I mean, and this is a dangerous problem, because like the GOP, this is a kind of a reform or revolution problem, and like the point where it's like you cannot simply reform this stuff. The response to 2008 wasn't simply more regulations, and the response to this isn't more regulations. It has to be a re-envisioning of how we actually like fund the priorities of society, because like like and because like the scary thing is the right, they have the simpler story, right? 2008 was, well, we shouldn't have tried to get too like this many black people into houses, and
Yeah.
the government was too aggressive into trying to get black people in houses, and this is what happens. And now it's just, oh well, the government forced banks to hire black and LGBT people and invest in black and LGBT people, and it's like, fundamentally, like, this system can't deliver for everybody, no matter how much we reform it and regulate, like, and like I would appreciate those regulations going back in, and I know like the banks themselves don't want them to go back in, but like until we get beyond these people being trusted with innovation, something as important as that, or jobs, right?
Yeah.
The entire reason the government's been doing this cheap money stuff since 2008 is because of jobs, supposedly.
Yeah.
Well, let's just start giving. Well, maybe we start giving people what people look for in a job, like say healthcare, or we just take care of that, and all of a sudden the jobs thing is a little bit less urgent. But then the government starts competing for like the employed people business too. I mean, until we start having those questions, yeah, like you said, like it is just it is a distraction. So, like I will grant that the Democrats saying we need to go back to this regulation is better than saying these banks are woke now.
Yeah.
That's true, but ultimately, like that's a small step.
I totally agree. And like, yeah, I mean, I think that's it. It's like, this is contrary to Musk's position. This is a very great example about how capital allocation in this country is fucked.
Yep.
And we're giving money to the wrong people, and they are hurting us. They're not just wasting it and doing bad things. They are like actively making life worse for people. And it's time that like the socialist promise is not just higher wages and healthcare. It's also utilizing the incredible productive capacity of human beings in this society for social good, so that we can live in that better and more futuristic society that the tech industry sort of sells, like the cheap fantasy that they sell of that, right? Actually build that, do the things that set us up to have a better, brighter future. It's about rationality in the system, something that capitalism has shown in its entirety to be a very, very irrational, very, very crisis prone system. And yeah, I think that is probably a good argument to start making that Silicon Valley and these folks and the government, in the sense of how they're giving money to these people, have been very bad at capital allocation. And it's probably time for working people to have way more of a say, in my opinion, the final say in how that is done, instead of these little freaks who are continuing to squander away tremendous amounts of money for very, very little social benefit.
Yeah. Just one final note. Calicanis in text messages between, this is one of those David Sachs all in buddies. Calicanis told Musk how little he actually gave a damn what workers, as in Paris Marx's write up. Day zero, he wrote, "Sharpen your blades, boys. 2 days a week office requirement equals 20% voluntary departures." So that's the guy who's being like, "Oh yeah, we got
to take care of the workers.
Got to take care about the workers." Sure, bro.
Yeah. Talking out both sides of your mouth. Well, we're keeping on the theme tonight. We're going to bring on Dwayne just right now to talk about why the AI stuff has been BS, and I think more importantly, how that's going to be utilized to wage war on workers. We'll be back with a little quick tease of Matt has been, diving deep under the hood, looking at this Russell Brand, Stephen Crowder interview. Sometimes you got to come after your former heroes, and we'll be doing that a little bit tonight. So you'll get the very, very first bit of that on the main show, and then join us over at patreon.com/Left Reckoning to support the show and get full access to all that good stuff behind the paywall. But let's, without further ado, let's get to Dwayne.